The iron collar burned against Nora's throat like a ring of liquid fire. 3 years of wearing the cursed metal had taught her to breathe through the pain, to swallow the screams that clawed at her chest every time the silver-laced links touched her skin. "Move faster, Omega." The guard's boot connected with her lower back, sending her sprawling across the frozen courtyard of the Thornwood Pack compound. Nora's palms split open against the jagged ice. Blood, warm and crimson, seeped into the snow. She didn't cry out. Crying was a luxury she'd abandoned long ago. She pushed herself up, her thin frame trembling from cold and exhaustion. The other slaves shuffled past her, their eyes hollow, their spirits broken. They had all learned the same lesson. In Thornwood, Omegas were less than dirt. But Nora carried a secret. A dangerous, impossible secret that pulsed beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. She was not just an Omega. She was the last living heir of the Moonfear bloodline, the ancient Packbinder dynasty that had once united all wolves under a single peaceful reign. Her grandmother had hidden her among the common wolves when Nora was just a child, moments before Alpha Vance Thornwood's soldiers burned their village to ash. Now, at 23, Nora worked in the kitchens of the very monster who had slaughtered her family. And she waited. "You there, the scarred one." Nora froze. The head housekeeper, a cruel beta woman named Mrs. Crane, was pointing directly at her. "Alpha Vance has summoned additional servants for the summit gathering. You will serve in the Great Hall tonight. Bathe. Change into proper attire. If you embarrass this pack, I will personally remove your tongue." Nora's heart hammered against her ribs. The summit. Every major alpha in the Northern Territories would be present, including him. Alpha King, Dominic Ashworth of the Ironville Pack. The rumors about the Alpha King were legendary and terrifying. He had conquered 7 territories in 5 years. His wolf was said to be the size of a small horse, black as midnight, with eyes that glowed like molten gold. He had never taken a mate, never shown mercy, never lost a battle. But the whispers that made Nora's blood run cold were about his heir. Prince Kai Ashworth, the Alpha King's only son, was dying. No healer could diagnose his illness. No medicine could stop his deterioration. The boy, barely 7 years old, had been bedridden for 2 years, wasting away while his father watched helplessly. Some said it was a curse from the moon goddess herself. Others whispered of dark magic, of enemies who had found a way to strike at the invincible Alpha King through his child. Nora knew the truth was likely far simpler and far more sinister. The great hall blazed with firelight and the scent of roasted meat. Nora moved through the crowd of powerful wolves like a ghost, her head bowed, her scarred hands hidden beneath her sleeves. The iron collar had been temporarily replaced with a leather band for the evening, a small mercy that allowed her skin to begin healing. She poured wine. She cleared plates. She kept her eyes down and her ears open. "The boy won't last another winter," a gruff voice from a cluster of alphas near the fireplace. "Dominic is a fool to keep searching for a cure. He should sire another heir while he still can." "He refuses," another voice, quieter. "They say he hasn't touched a woman since the Queen died. The boy is all he has left of her." Nora's hand trembled as she refilled a goblet. A father who loved his son so desperately that he would let his entire kingdom crumble rather than replace him. It was a concept so foreign to her experience in Thornwood that it felt like a fairy tale. "Omega." The word was spoken softly, but it cut through the noise of the hall like a blade. Nora looked up, and the world stopped. He was standing 3 feet away, towering over her by at least a foot. His shoulders were impossibly broad, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass. His dark hair was cropped short, and a thin scar ran from his left temple to his cheekbone. But it was his eyes that stole her breath. Gold, pure, liquid gold, burning with an intensity that made her wolf, long suppressed and nearly silent, suddenly howl to life inside her chest. Alpha King Dominic Ashworth. "You're bleeding," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her bones. Nora blinked. She looked down at her hands. The cuts from the courtyard had reopened, staining the white cloth napkin she was holding with crimson spots. "Forgive me, Alpha King." She dropped into a curtsy so deep her knees touched the floor. "I will remove myself immediately." "Stop." She froze, her heart slamming against her ribs. Dominic crouched down, bringing his face level with hers. This close, she could smell him. Pine and smoke and something wild, something ancient that called to the deepest part of her soul. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his golden eyes tracing the faded bruises on her wrists, the raw skin beneath the leather collar. Nora swallowed. "I am clumsy, Alpha King. I fell." "You're lying." It wasn't an accusation. It was a simple statement of fact. His wolf could hear the skip in her heartbeat, could smell the fear beneath her carefully constructed mask. "I am an Omega of the Thornwood Pack," Nora whispered. "My injuries are my own concern." Dominic's jaw tightened. Something flickered in his golden gaze. Not pity, something harder. Something that looked almost like recognition. "What is your name?" "Nora, Alpha King." "Nora," he repeated it slowly as if tasting the syllables. "Do you know who I am?" "Everyone knows who you are." "Then you know I could buy your contract from Vance Thornwood with a single word. I could take you out of this place tonight." Nora's breath caught. For one wild, desperate moment, hope flared in her chest. Then reality crashed back down. "Why would you do that, Alpha King?" Dominic studied her face for a long moment. His nostrils flared slightly, and his brow furrowed, as if he was trying to identify a scent he couldn't quite place. "I don't know," he admitted quietly, "but something about you feels familiar, like a memory I can't quite reach." Before Nora could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance of the great hall. Shouts, the crash of overturned furniture, a child's scream. Dominic was on his feet instantly, his powerful body moving with supernatural speed toward the disturbance. Nora followed without thinking, weaving through the panicked crowd until she reached the edge of a growing circle. And then she saw him. A small boy, no more than 7, lay convulsing on the stone floor. His skin was gray, his veins standing out like black rivers beneath his flesh. Foam flecked his lips, and his eyes had rolled back until only the whites showed. "Prince Kai." "Get back," Dominic roared, dropping to his knees beside his son. "Someone get the healers." "They're coming, Alpha King, but—" A guard hesitated. "The seizures are getting worse. The healers say there's nothing more they can do." Nora watched as the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories gathered his dying son into his arms, his face a mask of anguish. The boy's small body jerked and spasmed, his fingers clawing at the air. The crowd had formed a tight circle around them, whispers rippling through the assembled wolves like wind through autumn leaves. Nora could hear the speculation, the fear, the barely concealed satisfaction of some who saw opportunity in the Alpha King's vulnerability. "The curse is accelerating," someone muttered. "The moon goddess has truly abandoned the Ashworth line." "Perhaps it's time for new leadership in the north," another voice responded. "A king who can't protect his own heir is no king at all." Nora's fists clenched at her sides. These wolves knew nothing of curses or divine punishment. They spoke from ignorance and ambition, too blind to see the real evil in their midst. And then Nora smelled it. Beneath the scent of sickness, beneath the tang of fear and desperation, there was something else. Something dark and oily that coated the back of her throat like poison. Shadow root. Her grandmother had taught her about the forbidden plant before she died. It was a parasitic fungus that grew only in the deepest, darkest caves of the northern mountains. When ground into powder and administered in tiny doses over months or years, it slowly destroyed a wolf's connection to their inner beast, weakening them until their body simply gave up. It was untraceable by conventional means. It mimicked a dozen different diseases, and it was always fatal. Unless you knew the cure. Nora's hands trembled at her sides. If she revealed herself, if she exposed her knowledge, Alpha Vance would realize what she was. The last Moonfire heir, hiding in plain sight in his own kitchen. He would kill her before sunrise. But the boy, the innocent, dying boy in his father's arms. Nora thought of her own mother, burning alive while Vance Thornwood watched and laughed. She thought of her grandmother's final words, whispered as the soldiers broke down their door. Your gift is not yours to keep, child. It belongs to every wolf who needs it. Nora stepped forward. I can help him. The words fell into the chaos like stones into still water. Every eye in the room turned to her. Dominic's head snapped up, his golden gaze locking onto her face with terrifying intensity. What did you say? I can help him, Nora repeated, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. But I need to touch him. I need you to trust me. She's an Omega slave. Alpha Vance pushed through the crowd, his face twisted with fury. She's delusional. Guards, remove her. Wait. Dominic held up one hand and the guards froze mid-step. His eyes never left Nora's face. How? How can you help him when 100 healers have failed? Nora took a deep breath. Because I know what's killing him, and I know how to stop it. The silence stretched like a blade's edge. Nora could feel the weight of every gaze in the room pressing down on her, could smell the skepticism and suspicion rolling off the assembled alphas. But Dominic's expression shifted. The raw desperation in his eyes crystallized into something harder, something that looked almost like faith. Do it, he commanded. Dominic, you can't be serious. Alpha Vance stepped forward, his voice dripping with false concern. This creature is nothing but a kitchen slave. She probably poisoned the boy herself to gain your favor. She's been serving wine on the opposite side of the hall for the past hour, Dominic said coldly. I've been watching her. She never came within 20 feet of my son until now. Nora didn't have time to wonder why the Alpha King had been watching a lowly Omega servant all evening. She was already kneeling beside the boy, her hands hovering over his convulsing body. I need salt, she said quickly. Clean water, and someone needs to find me moonpetal flowers. They grow in the eastern garden, the white ones with silver centers. A servant scrambled to obey. Nora placed her palms flat against the boy's chest, closed her eyes, and reached deep inside herself. The Packbinder gift had been dormant for years, suppressed by fear and the constant presence of the iron collar. But now, with her skin finally beginning to heal and a child's life hanging in the balance, it roared to life like a wildfire. She could feel it. The shadow root had wrapped itself around Kai's wolf like a strangling vine, cutting off the connection between boy and beast. His inner wolf was still there, still fighting, but it was trapped in a cage of poisonous darkness. Nora began to pull. It was like trying to extract thorns from flesh with her bare hands. The shadow root resisted, digging deeper, fighting to maintain its hold. Kai screamed, his small body arching off the floor. You're hurting him, someone shouted. She's killing him, Vance roared. Stop her now. No one touches her. Dominic's command rang with absolute authority. Let her work. Nora gritted her teeth and pulled harder. Sweat poured down her face. Her arms trembled with the effort of channeling so much energy after years of suppression. And then, with a sound like tearing fabric, the first tendril of shadow root ripped free. Kai gasped, his eyes flying open. For a moment, they flickered between sickly gray and a faint, struggling gold. More, Nora breathed. I need the moon petals now. A servant thrust a handful of silver-white flowers into her hand. Nora crushed them between her palms, releasing their luminescent sap, and pressed the glowing paste directly over the boy's heart. The reaction was immediate. Kai's body went rigid, then relaxed. His breathing, which had been shallow and ragged, began to deepen. The black veins beneath his skin started to fade, retreating like shadows before dawn. Nora pulled the last of the shadow root free and collapsed backward, her vision swimming with exhaustion. Papa, Kai's voice was small and confused, but clear, clearer than it had been in years. Dominic let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He gathered his son into his arms, burying his face in the boy's hair. I'm here, he whispered. I'm right here, pup, I've got you. Nora watched through blurring eyes as father and son clung to each other. A faint smile touched her lips. Then the world went dark. She woke to the smell of clean linen and wood smoke. For a long, disorienting moment, she thought she was dreaming. She hadn't slept on anything softer than a straw pallet in 3 years. Nora's eyes snapped open. She was lying in a massive 4-poster bed draped with emerald velvet curtains. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating a room larger than the entire servants' quarters she had shared with 20 other Omegas. And sitting in a chair beside the bed, watching her with those burning golden eyes, was Alpha King Dominic Ashworth. You've been asleep for 2 days, he said quietly. Nora tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest. Easy, Dominic rose, moving to help her prop pillows behind her back. His touch was surprisingly gentle for such a powerful wolf. You nearly killed yourself saving my son. The healers said you channeled more energy in 10 minutes than most packbinders use in a lifetime. Nora froze. You know what I am. I suspected from the moment I smelled you in that great hall. The Moonfire bloodline has a distinctive scent, like honeysuckle and starlight. He settled back into his chair, his expression unreadable. My grandmother was a Moonfire, a distant cousin to the main line, but close enough that I grew up hearing stories about your family's gift. If you know what I am, then you know Alpha Vance will try to kill me. Alpha Vance is currently in my dungeon, awaiting trial for the attempted murder of my heir. Nora's breath caught. What? Your miracle cure did more than save my son, Nora. When you extracted the shadow root, trace elements of the poison remained on your skin. My alchemists analyzed it. Dominic's voice hardened to steel. Shadow root can only be harvested from one location in the Northern Territories, a cave system that lies entirely within Thornwood Pack borders. Vance has been supplying the poison that was slowly killing my son for the past 2 years. The pieces clicked together in Nora's mind. He wanted to weaken you, destroy your heir so you would have no choice but to form an alliance through marriage. His daughter, Dominic nodded grimly. He's been pushing me to consider a betrothal for years. I always refused. Now I know why he was so persistent. Nora sank back against the pillows, her mind reeling. The man who had murdered her family, who had enslaved her and countless other Omegas, was finally going to face justice. But something didn't add up. The collar, Nora said slowly, the iron collar with silver threading, it suppresses Omega abilities. Vance put it on me the day I arrived in Thornwood. She met Dominic's eyes. He knew what I was. He knew I was a packbinder, or at least suspected. That's why he tried so hard to keep my power contained. Which raises an interesting question. Dominic leaned forward, his gaze intense. How did an Omega from a destroyed bloodline end up as a kitchen slave in the compound of the very Alpha who slaughtered her family? Nora closed her eyes. The truth was dangerous. But after everything, she was tired of hiding. My grandmother hid me, she said quietly. When Vance's soldiers came, she used the last of her power to disguise my scent, to make me appear as nothing more than a common Omega. She told me to survive, to wait, to find a way to restore our bloodline when the time was right. And you chose to hide in plain sight, in the monster's own den. Where else would I be safe? Vance believed he had destroyed every Moonfire. He never thought to look for survivors among his own slaves. Dominic was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. You saved my son's life. You exposed my enemy. You are the last heir of one of the most powerful bloodlines in wolf history. He reached out, taking her hand in his. His skin was warm, his grip strong but gentle. Come to Ironville with me, Nora, not as a slave, not as a servant, as an honored guest. Let me give you the protection your grandmother wanted for you. Nora stared at their joined hands. His touch sent sparks racing up her arm, igniting something deep in her chest that she had long believed dead. Why, she whispered, why would you do this for me? Dominic's golden eyes bore into hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Because from the moment I saw you bleeding in that great hall, my wolf has been screaming one word over and over. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her scarred knuckles. Mate. The journey to Ironville took 3 days. Nora spent most of it in a state of stunned disbelief, certain she would wake up at any moment on her straw pallet in the Thornwood kitchens. But the carriage beneath her was real. The warm furs wrapped around her shoulders were real. And the small boy curled against her side, chattering endlessly about his favorite books and his pet rabbit and the adventures he wanted to have now that he was feeling better, was very real. Kai had attached himself to Nora the moment he woke up from his healing sleep. He refused to eat unless she was present, threw tantrums when she tried to leave his sight, and had taken to calling her my Nora with the possessive certainty of a child who had decided something and would not be swayed. He's never taken to anyone like this, Dominic said quietly on the second evening, watching his son demonstrate a card trick for an enthusiastic Nora. Not since his mother died. What happened to her? Nora asked softly. Pain flickered across Dominic's features. Childbirth complications. She was too weak to survive the delivery. He paused. The healers said her wolf had been mysteriously depleted for months before the birth. They couldn't explain why. Understanding dawned cold and terrible in Nora's stomach. The shadow root. Vance was poisoning her too. I believe so. I think he's been trying to destroy my bloodline for years, one family member at a time. Dominic's hands clenched into fists. My father died of a sudden illness when I was 18. My younger brother vanished during a hunting trip and was never found. My mate, my son. His voice cracked. I thought I was cursed. I thought the moon goddess herself had abandoned my family. Nora reached out, covering his fist with her small hand. It wasn't a curse, Dominic. It was a monster, and monsters can be defeated. He looked at her then, his golden eyes soft with wonder and something deeper, something that made her heart race. How are you so strong? He asked. After everything you've survived, how do you still have hope? Nora considered the question seriously. My grandmother used to say that darkness exists to make the light more precious. Every time Vance hurt me, I told myself that one day I would use that pain to help someone else. I would survive so that my gift wouldn't die with me. She smiled faintly. I never imagined it would lead me here. Where is here? Sitting in a carriage with an alpha king and his son, being offered a life I never dared to dream of. Dominic turned his hand over beneath hers, interlacing their fingers. Then start dreaming, Nora, because I intend to give you everything you've ever wanted and more. Ironville was everything Thornwood was not. Where Vance's compound had been cold, brutal, and gray, Dominic's territory was vibrant with life. The pack villages were clean and prosperous. The wolves they passed bowed respectfully to their alpha king, but showed no fear. Children played in the streets. Merchants called out their wares. The smell of fresh bread and blooming flowers filled the air. As their carriage rolled through the main thoroughfare, Nora noticed something that made her throat tighten with emotion. Omegas walked freely among the other wolves. No collars, no chains, no hunched shoulders or downcast eyes. They laughed and bargained in the marketplace, held hands with partners of all ranks, scolded pups who strayed too close to the street. "You're starring," Dominic said softly. "The Omegas," Nora whispered. "They're not marked, they're not separated." "Why would they be?" Genuine confusion colored his voice. "They're pack members like any other. They have skills, talents, families. What purpose would segregation serve?" Nora turned to look at him, really look, as if seeing him for the first time. "In Thornwood, Omegas are property. We're bought and sold like livestock. We're forbidden from mating with anyone above our station. We're beaten for making eye contact with alphas." Dominic's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching beneath his skin. "I knew Vance was cruel. I didn't realize how deeply the rot had spread." "It's not just Thornwood. Most packs in the Eastern Territories follow similar practices. The old ways, they call it. Tradition." Nora's voice turned bitter. "As if tradition justifies cruelty." "Not in Ironville." Dominic reached across the carriage to take her hand. "Not ever. Here, every wolf is judged by their actions, not their rank at birth. Omegas serve on our council. One of my best warriors was born an Omega. The idea of collaring a wolf for the crime of being born with less aggression." He shook his head, disgust evident on his features. "It's barbaric." Kai, who had been dozing against Nora's shoulder, stirred at the emotion in his father's voice. "Papa, what's wrong?" "Nothing, pup." Dominic's expression softened. "I was just telling Nora about our home. Look, we're almost there." The boy scrambled to the window, pressing his nose against the glass. "There it is. Nora, look, that's our castle." "This is your kingdom," Nora breathed, staring out the carriage window in wonder. "This is our home," Dominic corrected gently. "And soon, I hope you will think of it as yours as well." The Ironville pack house was a massive structure of gray stone and dark timber, perched on a cliff overlooking a silver lake. It should have been intimidating, but somehow it felt welcoming, like a fortress that protected rather than imprisoned. Nora was given a suite of rooms adjacent to the royal quarters. Her chambers were decorated in soft blues and silvers, with a balcony that overlooked the moonlit water. For the first hour, she simply stood at the railing, breathing clean mountain air, and trying to convince herself this wasn't a cruel dream. A knock at the door interrupted her reverie. "Come in." Dominic entered, looking less like an alpha king and more like a nervous suitor. He had changed out of his traveling clothes into a simple white shirt and dark trousers. His feet were bare. "I wanted to make sure you had everything you need," he said, hovering uncertainly near the doorway. "I have more than I've had in 3 years," Nora replied honestly. "A real bed, clean clothes, no collar." She touched her bare throat, still marveling at the absence of pain. "I don't know how to thank you. You saved my son. You owe me nothing. And yet you've given me everything." Dominic crossed the room slowly, stopping an arm's length away. "I meant what I said, Nora, about my wolf, about what you are to me." Nora's heart began to pound. The mate bond. "I've felt it since the moment I saw you, that pull, that certainty." He raised one hand, hesitating before gently cupping her cheek. "But I know you've been through hell. I know trust doesn't come easily after what you've suffered. I won't force anything on you. I won't claim you without your consent. Whatever happens between us, it will be your choice, always your choice." Tears pricked at Nora's eyes. "No one has ever given me a choice before." "Then let me be the first." He dropped his hand, stepping back to give her space. "I'll wait, Nora, for as long as you need. A month, a year, a decade. My wolf chose you, and that choice is forever." He turned to leave. "Dominic." He paused at the door, looking back. Nora crossed to him in 3 quick steps, rose onto her toes, and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative. Then Dominic's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her against him, and the world exploded into fire. The mate bond roared to life between them, a golden thread connecting soul to soul, wolf to wolf. Nora gasped against his mouth as she felt his emotions flood through her. Wonder, joy, fierce, protective love. And underneath it all, a desperate hope that finally, after years of loss and loneliness, he had found his home. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "I should let you rest," he said reluctantly. "Stay," Nora gripped the front of his shirt. "Please, I don't want to be alone tonight." Dominic's golden eyes blazed with emotion. He swept her into his arms and carried her to the massive bed, laying her down gently on the soft coverlet. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised, settling beside her and pulling her into his embrace. "Not tonight, not ever." For the first time in 3 years, Nora slept without nightmares. The following weeks were the happiest of Nora's life. She spent her mornings with Kai, helping him rebuild his strength through gentle exercises and playful games. The shadow root had done significant damage, but with consistent treatment using her packbinder abilities and the moonpetal remedies, the boy improved daily. His wolf, long suppressed by the poison, began to emerge. Nora was present for his first successful shift since the illness began, tears streaming down her face as she watched the small gray pup stumble around Dominic's study on unsteady legs. "I did it, Papa," Kai yipped, his tail wagging frantically. "Nora, look, I did it." "You did it, sweetheart." Nora knelt down, laughing as the pup launched himself into her arms. "I'm so proud of you." Dominic watched them from behind his desk, his expression soft with love. Later that night, he would tell Nora that watching her with his son made him fall in love with her all over again. Her afternoons were spent learning the workings of the Ironville pack. Dominic's beta, a massive warrior named Marcus, took her under his wing, teaching her about pack politics, territory disputes, and the delicate balance of power that kept the Northern Territories stable. "You'll need to know all this when you become Luna," Marcus said matter-of-factly during one of their lessons. Nora nearly dropped the territorial map she was holding. "Luna." The Alpha King hasn't exactly been subtle about his intentions. "The whole pack knows you're his mate," Marcus grinned. "The formal ceremony is just a matter of time." Nora's evenings belonged to Dominic. They would walk together along the lake shore, talking for hours about everything and nothing. He told her about his childhood, about his parents and brother, about the weight of the crown he had worn since he was 18. She told him about the Moonfire legacy, about the grandmother who had sacrificed everything to save her, about the years of hiding and pain and desperate hope. "I used to dream about revenge," Nora admitted one night, wrapped in Dominic's arms on the balcony of her chambers. "I thought that if I could just make Vance pay for what he did, the pain would stop. And now I realize that revenge wouldn't have healed anything. It would have just created more darkness." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "You healed me, Dominic, you and Kai, this pack, this life you've offered me." "You healed yourself," Dominic corrected gently. "I just gave you a safe place to do it." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Nora felt the last of her walls crumble to dust. But happiness, as Nora should have known, never lasted. The first sign of trouble came 6 weeks after her arrival in Ironville. A messenger rode in from the eastern border, his horse lathered, and his face pale with fear. "Alpha King." The man dropped to one knee in the great hall, gasping for breath. "The Thornwood pack has fractured. Vance's supporters have installed his nephew, Malcolm, as interim alpha. They're gathering forces. They're demanding the return of their stolen property." Nora felt the blood drain from her face. Stolen property, they meant her. Dominic rose from his throne, his expression thunderous. Malcolm Thornwood commands a fraction of Vance's forces. He's no threat to Ironvale. Forgive me, Alpha King, but that's not all. The messenger swallowed hard. Malcolm has formed an alliance with the Shadowmere Pack, and the Blackwater Pack, and the Ravencroft Pack. They're calling it the Coalition of Aggrieved Alphas. He hesitated. They're claiming that you've declared war on the traditional pack structure by harboring a fugitive Omega and executing a sovereign Alpha without council approval. Vance Thornwood tried to murder my son. They're saying you have no proof, that the Omega witch bewitched you and fabricated the evidence. Dominic's roar shook the rafters. The messenger cowered, and even the battle-hardened warriors lining the hall flinched. Nora stepped forward, placing a calming hand on Dominic's arm. She could feel his fury through the mate bond, hot and wild, but she could also feel his fear. Fear for her, fear for Kai, fear for the pack he had sworn to protect. How many, Nora asked the messenger quietly, how many wolves does this coalition command? At least 3,000, my Luna, perhaps more. 3,000 wolves. Ironvale had 1,500 warriors, all fiercely loyal, but they would be outnumbered 2 to 1. They're coming for me, Nora said, turning to face Dominic. If I leave, if I turn myself over, they'll have no reason to attack. Kai will be safe. The pack will be safe. No. Dominic. I said no. He gripped her shoulders, his golden eyes blazing. I will not sacrifice my mate to appease a coalition of cowards and murderers. I will not let them take you. I will burn the entire Northern Territory to the ground before I let anyone touch you. And how many will die in that burning? Nora asked softly. How many innocent wolves will pay the price for my protection? Dominic's face contorted with anguish. He pulled her against his chest, burying his face in her hair. I can't lose you, he whispered. I already lost everyone else. I can't lose you too. You won't, Nora pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. But we need to be smart about this. We need a plan. What kind of plan? Nora took a deep breath. The idea forming in her mind was dangerous. It might not work. It might get them all killed. But it was the only chance they had. The Packbinder gift isn't just about healing, she said slowly. My grandmother told me stories about the ancient Moonfire Lunas. They could do more than mend broken bodies. They could unite wolves, create bonds between packs that were stronger than any alliance of convenience. What are you saying? I'm saying that if this coalition wants a war, we don't have to fight it with swords. Nora met his eyes steadily. We can fight it with something more powerful. We can show them what a true pack bond looks like. We can give them something to believe in instead of something to fear. Dominic stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. You want to challenge them, not to battle but to unity. The old laws still stand. Any alpha can call a gathering of packs and demand a chance to speak before violence is declared. If I can reach even a few of them, if I can show them that the Packbinder gift is real and that it can benefit everyone, they might turn against Malcolm and his coalition, or at least refuse to fight his war. Dominic kissed her fiercely. You brilliant, impossible woman, let's do it. The preparations for the gathering took 2 weeks of intense planning. Dominic sent messengers to every pack in the Northern Territories, invoking the ancient rite of parley. Meanwhile, Nora threw herself into training, pushing her Packbinder abilities to their limits under the guidance of Marcus and the Ironvale healers. You're exhausting yourself, Dominic said one evening, finding her collapsed in the training yard, her hands still glowing faintly with residual silver light. If you burn out before the gathering, none of this will matter. Nora accepted the water skin he offered, drinking deeply. I have to be strong enough, Dominic. The Packbinder connection I'm planning to create requires power I've never channeled before. If I fail, if I can't reach them. You won't fail. He sat beside her in the grass, pulling her against his side. I've watched you heal my son from the brink of death. I've seen you survive 3 years of torture without breaking. You are the strongest person I have ever known, Nora. The moon goddess herself couldn't have chosen a better champion. What if they don't listen? What if Malcolm's lies have spread too deep? Then we fight. Dominic's voice hardened. I meant what I said. I will burn the world for you if I have to, but I believe in your plan. I believe in you. Nora leaned into his warmth, drawing strength from the mate bond that pulsed between them. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the first Packbinder, a woman named Celeste who lived 1,000 years ago. She united the warring wolf clans during the Great Darkness, when humans hunted our kind to near extinction. I know the stories. My grandmother told them too. Celeste didn't use force or fear. She created a web of connections so powerful that every wolf could feel what every other wolf felt. The hatred and suspicion that had divided them for generations simply couldn't survive that level of empathy. They realized they were all the same, underneath the pack loyalties and territorial disputes, just wolves trying to protect their families. Dominic was quiet for a moment. You think you can recreate what Celeste did? I don't know. No Packbinder has attempted anything that ambitious in centuries. The gift has been dying out, weakening with each generation. Nora looked at her hands, still faintly luminescent. But I have to try. For Kai. For you. For every Omega still wearing a collar in some Alpha's compound. Then try. Dominic pressed a kiss to her temple. And know that whatever happens, I will be standing beside you, always. The night before the gathering, Nora couldn't sleep. She wandered the halls of the Ironville Pack House, eventually finding herself in the portrait gallery, where generations of Ashworth Alphas stared down from gilded frames. She stopped before a smaller painting, partially hidden in an alcove. A young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders. That's her, Dominic's voice came from behind her. My mate, Elena. Nora felt a pang of something that wasn't quite jealousy. She was beautiful. She was kind, patient, everything I wasn't. Dominic moved to stand beside her, his gaze fixed on the portrait. I was so angry when she died, angry at the healers for not saving her, angry at myself for not protecting her better, angry at the moon goddess for taking her from me. That's natural. Grief often wears the mask of anger. I think she would have liked you. Dominic's voice was soft. You have the same fire in you that she had, the same determination to make the world better, even when it seems impossible. Nora reached for his hand. Tell me about her. I want to know the woman who gave you Kai. They talked until dawn, sitting on the floor of the portrait gallery. Dominic shared memories of his first mate, the love they had built, the joy of Kai's birth, the devastating loss of watching her fade. And Nora listened, understanding that loving her didn't diminish his love for Elena, that hearts were not finite containers with limited space. Thank you, she said, as the first rays of sunrise painted the windows, for trusting me with her memory. Thank you for understanding. Dominic cupped her face in his hands. You are not a replacement, Nora. You are a new chapter, a second chance I never thought I deserved. You deserve everything, Nora whispered, and I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it. The gathering of packs was held on neutral ground, a vast meadow at the intersection of 7 territories. Thousands of wolves assembled, most in human form but many prowling the perimeter as beasts, their eyes glowing in the torchlight. Nora stood on the central platform beside Dominic, her heart pounding so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. She was dressed simply, in a white gown that left her scarred arms bare. No crown, no jewels, just herself. Malcolm Thornwood stood on the opposite platform, flanked by his coalition allies. He was a smaller, meaner version of his uncle, with the same cruel eyes and the same contemptuous sneer. "You stand accused, Alpha King Dominic Ashworth." Malcolm's voice rang across the meadow. "You have executed a sovereign Alpha without council approval. You have harbored a fugitive Omega who murdered her owner. You have disrupted the natural order that has kept our packs stable for centuries." "Vance Thornwood tried to poison my son," Dominic replied, his voice equally powerful. "He murdered my mate. He conspired for years to destroy my bloodline. I have evidence. I have witnesses. I have the shadow root itself, analyzed by neutral alchemists who confirmed it came from Thornwood lands." "Fabrications," Malcolm snarled. "Manufactured by your Omega witch." "She is not my Omega." Dominic's eyes flashed gold. "She is my Luna, my fated mate, the last heir of the Moonfair bloodline which your uncle slaughtered in his pursuit of power." A ripple ran through the crowd. The Moonfair name was known, even now, even after all these years. "Lies," Malcolm spat. "The Moonfair line is extinct. Everyone knows this." "Then let me prove it." Nora stepped forward, and the meadow fell silent. "I am Nora Moonfire, daughter of Clara, granddaughter of Alara the Last." Her voice was clear and strong, carrying across the crowd with a power she hadn't known she possessed. "For 3 years, I was enslaved by Vance Thornwood. He put an iron collar around my throat to suppress my gift. He worked me until my hands bled and my body broke." She held up her scarred palms for all to see. "But he could not destroy what I am. The Packbinder gift lives in my blood, passed down through 100 generations. And tonight, I will show you its power." She closed her eyes and reached deep inside herself, deeper than she had ever gone before. The gift responded, rising like a tide, filling her with warmth and light. When she opened her eyes, they were glowing silver. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Wolves dropped to their knees. Even some of the coalition alphas stumbled backward in shock. Nora raised her hands, and threads of shimmering silver light began to flow from her fingertips. They spread across the meadow like a spider's web, touching every wolf present. And then the miracle happened. Each wolf felt it, a sudden, overwhelming sense of connection. Not just to their own pack, but to every pack present. The hatred and suspicion that had divided them for generations began to dissolve, replaced by understanding, by empathy, by the bone-deep knowledge that they were all part of something greater than themselves. For one perfect moment, 3,000 wolves breathed as one. Then Nora released the connection, and the silver light faded. The silence that followed was deafening. Malcolm Thornwood was the first to speak, his voice shaking with fury and fear. "Witchcraft," he snarled. "Dark magic, she's trying to control us." "I controlled nothing," Nora replied calmly. "I simply showed you what we could be, united, strong, a family instead of a collection of warring factions." She turned to address the crowd directly. "The old ways preach strength through dominance. They tell us that Omegas are worthless, that Alphas must crush all opposition, that the only path to power is through violence." She took Dominic's hand, interlacing her scarred fingers with his. "But there is another way, a way where every wolf is valued, where strength comes from lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down, where the Packbinder gift serves all, not just the few who can afford to buy it." She looked at Malcolm, her silver eyes steady. "I am not your enemy. Neither is Alpha King Dominic. The true enemy is fear. Fear of change. Fear of losing power. Fear that if Omegas are treated as equals, Alphas will somehow become less." She smiled faintly. "But that's not how light works, Malcolm. When you share a flame, it doesn't diminish. It grows. It spreads. It illuminates the darkness for everyone." The silence stretched. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a single wolf began to howl. It was a howl of allegiance, a howl of acceptance. Another wolf joined, then another, then 100, then 1,000. The coalition crumbled. Alphas who had pledged themselves to Malcolm stepped back, their eyes wide with wonder and shame. One by one, they dropped to their knees before the central platform. Malcolm Thornwood stood alone, his face twisted with impotent rage. "This isn't over," he hissed. "Yes," Dominic replied coldly, "it is." He turned to the nearest coalition alpha, a grizzled warrior named Thorn who commanded the Blackwater Pack. "Take him into custody. He will stand trial for his uncle's crimes, as an accomplice who knew and assisted in the poisoning of my son." Malcolm screamed and struggled as the warriors seized him, but no one moved to help. His coalition had abandoned him. His power had evaporated like morning mist. Nora watched him being dragged away and felt nothing but weary relief. It was over. The mating ceremony was held under the full moon, 3 weeks after the gathering. Every pack that had attended sent representatives. The meadow that had nearly been a battlefield was transformed into a celebration. Nora stood in the bridal chambers of the Ironville pack house, staring at her reflection in the full-length mirror. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Gone was the hollow-eyed slave with the iron collar and the bleeding hands. In her place stood a Luna, draped in a gown of silver and white, sewn with tiny crystals that caught the moonlight streaming through the windows. Her dark hair had been braided with moonpetal flowers, the same flowers that had saved Kai's life. Her scars, once hidden in shame, were visible on her bare arms, testaments to her survival. "You're beautiful," the voice came from the doorway. Nora turned to find Kai standing there, dressed in a miniature version of his father's ceremonial attire. His golden eyes, so like Dominic's, shone with barely contained excitement. "Are you ready to walk me down the aisle?" Nora asked, crouching to adjust his collar. "I've been practicing," Kai said seriously. "Marcus showed me exactly how many steps to take and when to stop. I won't mess up, I promise." "I know you won't, sweetheart." "Nora," the boy's voice grew hesitant, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "After today, will you be my mother? For real?" Nora's heart clenched. She cupped his small face in her hands, looking into eyes that had once been clouded with pain and poison. "I've been your mother since the moment I pulled that darkness out of you," she said softly. "A ceremony doesn't change that, but if you want to call me mother or mama or anything else, I would be the happiest woman in all the territories." Kai threw his arms around her neck, nearly knocking her off balance. "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, my brave little wolf." The ceremony itself was a blur of ancient words and sacred rituals. Nora remembered fragments. The weight of the ceremonial cloak Dominic draped over her shoulders, the taste of the bonding wine they shared from a single cup, the gasps from the crowd when her eyes flickered silver during their vows. But mostly, she remembered his face. The way Dominic looked at her as if she were the moon itself, come down from the sky to stand beside him. The tears he didn't bother to hide when she spoke her vows. The trembling of his hands when he slid the mating ring onto her finger. "With this mark, I claim you as mine," Dominic said, his voice rough with emotion. "With this bond, I bind my soul to yours. In this life and whatever comes after, I am yours and you are mine." "In this life and whatever comes after," Nora repeated. "I am yours and you are mine." Nora wore a gown of silver and white, sewn with tiny crystals that caught the moonlight. Kai walked her down the aisle, his small hand gripping hers tightly, his face beaming with pride. Dominic waited at the altar, resplendent in black and gold. When their eyes met, Nora felt the mate bond pulse with joy so intense it brought tears to her eyes. The ceremony was simple, ancient words, binding vows, the mingling of blood under the moon goddess's watchful gaze. When Dominic's teeth sank into the soft flesh of Nora's neck, marking her as his forever, she felt the last piece of her broken soul click into place. She was home, she was safe, she was loved. And as the assembled wolves raised their voices in a howl of celebration, Nora looked out at the sea of faces, former enemies united in joy, and knew that her grandmother's sacrifice had not been in vain. The Moonfire bloodline would continue. The Packbinder gift would serve future generations, and the darkness that had haunted her for so long would never touch her again. "I love you," Dominic murmured against her hair, holding her close as the moon rose higher. "I love you too," Nora whispered back. "My Alpha King, my mate, my home." Below the platform, Kai had shifted into his wolf form and was chasing fireflies across the meadow, his yips of laughter echoing in the night. Their family was complete, their future was bright. And somewhere in the heavens, Nora could have sworn she heard her grandmother's voice, whispering on the wind. "Well done, child, well done." 6 months had passed since the mating ceremony. The Northern Territories had transformed under the joint leadership of Alpha King Dominic and Luna Nora Ashworth. The coalition packs, once enemies, had become allies. Trade routes flourished. Border disputes were settled through negotiation rather than bloodshed. And in the heart of Ironville, in a sunlit nursery overlooking the Silver Lake, Nora sat in a rocking chair, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly. "Is my brother going to be an alpha like Papa?" Kai asked, sprawled on the floor with his wooden toy soldiers. Nora smiled, running her fingers through the boy's dark hair. "We don't know if it's a brother yet, sweetheart. It might be a sister." "I hope it's a brother. Girls are boring." Kai wrinkled his nose. "Except you, Nora, you're not boring, you're magic." A soft knock interrupted them. Dominic stepped through the doorway, his golden eyes immediately finding Nora's face. "The council meeting finished early," he said, crossing the room to press a kiss to her forehead. "How are my 2 favorite people?" 3, Kai corrected proudly. "Don't forget the baby." "How could I forget?" Dominic knelt beside the rocking chair, placing his large hand over Nora's on her stomach. "The healers say everything is progressing perfectly. Strong heartbeat, active movement." "Very active," Nora agreed with a rueful smile. "This one kicks like they're training for battle." A true Ashworth, then. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the afternoon sun paint golden patterns on the nursery floor. It was in moments like these that Nora still had to remind herself that this was real, that she wasn't going to wake up in the Thornwood kitchens with an iron collar burning her skin. "I received word from the Southern Territories today," Dominic said quietly. "The Moonfire ancestral lands have been officially restored. The council voted unanimously to return the territory to its rightful heir." Nora's breath caught. "What?" "It's yours, Nora. All of it. The forests, the villages, the sacred grounds where your grandmother trained. The packs who now occupy those lands have agreed to pledge allegiance to you as their Luna, while remaining under the protection of Ironville." Tears spilled down Nora's cheeks. She had never expected this, never dared to hope that the lands her family had protected for generations could be reclaimed. "My grandmother's home," she whispered. "I never thought I would see it again." "I was thinking we could visit after the baby is born," Dominic continued, his voice gentle. "Kai should know his heritage. Our children should know where their mother's gift comes from." "Our children," Nora laughed through her tears. "You keep saying that like there will be more than one." Dominic grinned, a rare flash of boyish mischief that made her heart flutter. "I'm planning on it if you're willing. I want a whole pack of pups running through these halls. Little healers with silver eyes and stubborn streaks a mile wide. Like their father. Like their mother." He kissed her softly. "You're the strongest person I've ever known, Nora Moonfire Ashworth. Our children will be unstoppable." Later that evening, after Kai had been tucked into bed and the castle had settled into peaceful silence, Nora stood on the balcony of the royal chambers. The full moon hung heavy in the sky, its silver light spilling across the lake like liquid starlight. She felt Dominic's arms wrap around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything, nothing." Nora leaned back into his warmth. "I was thinking about my grandmother, about what she would say if she could see me now." "What would she say?" Nora closed her eyes, remembering the old woman's weathered face, her silver-streaked hair, the way her hands had glowed when she used the packbinder gift. She would say that the moon goddess works in mysterious ways, that even the darkest night eventually gives way to dawn. Nora turned in Dominic's arms, looking up at his beloved face. She would say that I found exactly what I was meant to find. "And what is that?" Nora smiled, rising on her toes to press a kiss to his jaw. "Home." In the distance, a wolf howled, then another, and another. The pack's voices rose in a chorus of joy and belonging, echoing across the mountains, carrying a message that would be heard for generations to come. The Alpha King had found his Luna, the packbinder had found her family, and the Northern Territories had found their peace. The Ashworth legacy would continue, the Moonfire gift would flourish, and the love that had bloomed from darkness and pain would light the way for wolves yet to be born. This was not the end of their story. It was only the beginning. 2 years later, the Ashworth family gathered on the steps of the Ironville Pack House to welcome the representatives from all 15 allied packs. Little Aurora Ashworth, barely 1 year old, squirmed in her father's arms, her silver eyes wide with curiosity. Her older brother Kai stood proudly beside his mother, now a confident 9-year-old who had taken on the role of Aurora's fierce protector. Nora watched her family with a heart so full it ached. The scars on her wrists had faded to thin white lines. The nightmares that had once plagued her sleep had become rare visitors. The iron collar that had once burned her throat was now a distant memory, a darkness that had made the light all the more precious. "Ready?" Dominic asked, shifting Aurora to his other arm and reaching for Nora's hand. "Always," she replied. Together, they walked forward to greet their guests, the Alpha King and his Luna, united in purpose and bound by a love that had survived slavery, poison, and war. As Nora shook hands with Alphas who had once been enemies, as she embraced Lunas who had become sisters, as she watched her daughter reach out to touch the face of a visiting pack member with the instinctive curiosity of a natural healer, she thought about the girl she had been. Broken, alone, hiding in plain sight. That girl was gone now, transformed by love and courage into something stronger, someone worthy of the legacy she carried. Luna Nora Ashworth, the last Moonfire, had risen from the ashes of her family's destruction to build something beautiful. And in the faces of her children, in the bond she shared with her mate, in the unity she had helped forge among the packs, her grandmother's sacrifice found its ultimate meaning. The packbinder gift was not hers to keep. It belonged to every wolf who needed it. And Nora would spend the rest of her life making sure that gift was shared freely, generously, with all the love her enormous heart could hold. "I love you," Dominic murmured in her ear as the celebration began around them. Nora smiled, squeezing his hand, watching her pack her family, her world come together in joy. "I love you too," she whispered back, "always and forever." Above them, the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the Ironville Mountains. And in that light, surrounded by the wolves who loved her, Nora finally understood what her grandmother had meant all those years ago. The gift was not just healing. The gift was hope, and hope once kindled could never truly be extinguished. Not by iron collars, not by shadow root, not by the cruelty of small men who feared what they could not control. Hope endured, hope survived, hope conquered. And in the end, hope was all that really mattered.